Okay, if we can have your attention back to the whole group, please. Thinking about standard one, what would anybody want to venture or volunteer a score that they would award this person on standard one on content? Well, how about if we do this? This might be safer. How many people gave her a score of 0? How many gave a score of 1? Few, okay. How many gave a score of 2? A few more. How about a score of 3? Couple, okay. Anybody give a score of 4? All right.
That is similar to university supervisors. That is very similar to university supervisors, by the way. Okay, let's take it apart. Let's look at standard one, and you can see what the DESI team came up with, which I agree seems high. But let's break it down. Okay, see the first behavior that they notice. Opportunities to process in groups and partners. That takes you to level 3, bullet 1. So now we've got 1 in the number 3 column, okay? Accurate, relevant examples. That takes you to level 3, number 2 bullet. Majority engaged in talking, interacting, and raising hands. That takes you to level 3, bullet number 4. Bullet number 4. So now we have 3 level 3 bullets identified. Limited vocabulary use was one of the areas where would have bumped them back to a level 2. And limited opportunities to dialogue about the final findings, the conclusions that could be drawn at the end. That also took them back to a level 2. So if you break it apart behavior by behavior, you have 3 bullets on level 3 and 2 bullets on level 2. One way to look at it, which takes you to a score of 3.
So let's talk about standard 5. Classroom ed. Anybody want to? Are you feeling any braver, or should we go through the 0, 1, 2 again? Raise your hand if you gave them a 0 on standard 5. How about a 1? 2? Okay. 3? Any 4s? Okay, it looked like the majority of you felt like they earned a score of 2. So let's see what the judges say.
Okay, once again, I probably should have begun all of this by telling you the hopeful outcome is that we all agree within 1 score level. So if they're not those large extremes. Do you know where, can you flip us to standard 5? Look at everywhere for that. Okay, again, the team came up with a score of 3. So here's the behaviors. They said monitors and intervenes with behavior as needed. That takes you to level 3, bullet number 1. Variety of strategies for regaining attention. That's level 3, bullet number 2. Positive climate, positive praise given. That's a level 3, bullet 4. And correct students in front of peers. I liken that to level 2, bullet 3. So again, we're within one. Definitely. We have very few who are seeing this as a level 1, which puts us pretty much right on top. Any more conversation about that? I mean, you can see how there could be different ways to discuss it, but the key here is you take what you saw and plug it into the rubric. Which of these bullets does that represent?
Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if you had any suggestions to help us not do a bias, because we were talking that, that was hard because that room was a little louder than what maybe we would have. I mean, I'm a PE teacher, so it's loud. It's not loud all the time. But how do you suggest us to try not to put a personal bias? Like, what are some things that we need to be thinking of so that we don't do that, especially on the classroom management? Because to me, that's where I think we have a tendency to put emotional bias in.
So her question was, what are some thoughts or strategies about putting your bias aside, especially in terms of behavior management, because that's going to be something that people have some pretty strong emotions and opinions about.
I agree. Well, one thing to ask yourself is, do you see that teacher behavior interfering with the learning or being distracting from the learning or in some of those ways? And if not, then it's like, well, they're probably used to it. That's a tough one. Very, very tough. We all struggle with that all day, every day. And there's not, I think you have to come to terms with there's not one right way to get there. I would have had the children use crayons, not markers. Well, so, it's just like sometimes you just have to get past that.
One thing I would suggest, sorry.
Go for it.
Uh,
Here. Come on, so go.
Oh, I've got a gymnasium voice. I was a PE teacher. One thing I might suggest is that, especially with that classroom management piece, that you spend a lot of time in those first few days that you're with your teacher candidate, going over your classroom expectations. If you're a PBIS school and you have a matrix, a behavior matrix, or whatever your expectations are that the students are used to, that's the key piece. We don't want anything unlearned over the course of time that this teacher candidate is in the classroom. So take the time to kind of front load some of those kinds of expectations so that they understand and give, just like we do with the kids, modeling, show them maybe some intentional situations where you're going to address some universal correctors, some pre-corrects in terms of getting the kids ready for transitions and different things like that. You guys know when things are going to fall apart in terms of classroom behavior, so help them understand that before you evaluate them on that particular standard.
I just want to also add that I think it's valuable if before you ever go to the rubric, you think and analyze, hey, did learning happen? Was that a good lesson? Were there elements of that were effective? So get that global opinion about the teaching element, and then zero in on various bullet behaviors. Because you're going to know that is a lesson that did not work. And then you go back and see, well, why didn't it work? What were the behaviors that lend itself to that? And so most of you thought that was in the 2 range, which means to me that you thought there was some meaningful learning that was happening. And so then you go and find the bullets that help you quantify that.
Thank you for your question.
Yeah, good question. Other questions? Yes.
Part of the issue that I had was, it says demonstrate tolerance before, if you've only seen them that one time, you don't know what rapport they built, so you don't know,
Very good
it
one.
says, clearly communicating expectations in advance, you don't know if they went
How
through
they set the
procedures
stage.
or
students about trying to help fill in those missing pieces.
If you couldn't hear, her question was, what do you do when if you don't get to observe them? Lori's got kind of a unique situation in her cooperating teacher opportunity where she's not going to be with that person every day. So she's really almost taking on the role of a university supervisor type position, but most of you will be in the room with that person often enough. But her question was, what if you don't see that very often, or you don't see it at the time that you're really actually taking notes and making a formative assessment? So that's what Diane was alluding to, where you just have to try to look for the consistencies.
Over visits for supervisors, or if you're not there all day, every day, have to look for, did I see this again, did I see this again? And even within the lesson, you see if there's consistencies or inconsistencies, even within a particular lesson. Any thoughtful questions? Thank you.
Any other thoughts or comments about how you scored versus the way that the DESE team came up with a recommended score? We heard some collective groans when we saw those scores, so
Yeah.
feel free to try to gain a better understanding if you want. Ready to see another one? This one's going to be a lot tougher, so get your pencil sharp and get ready. Challenging.
Stay with 1 and 5.
We are still doing standard 1 and standard 5. This time it's a high school English class.
Why do I say let's stop for a minute and some of you are still talking? Lois? Shaquille? Kevin? Okay, so the reason that we're discussing this question today, I
they do like the wedding and the.
5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Your job right now is only to listen. At the end when I say, are there any questions, you can then raise your hand and you can then ask. Please do not interrupt. If there's something urgent that you're thinking about, James, write it down. Kevin. After I said one, if your lips are still moving, I'm writing down your name. Okay. Romeo's going to meet up with his friends. It's a very hot day. It's a very hot day. His friends, I am speaking, I said at the end, if there are any questions, you will raise your hand, I will call on you and you will ask. No interruptions. Right, simple directions. He's going to meet up with his friends. Sizzle with his friends will also be here. Remember? Yeah. His friends killed Romeo. He sent a letter to his home. Yes.
I told you it's going to be hard. I didn't say it was going to be hard to judge. Hard to watch. This probably won't take very long to discuss with your shoulder partner and score, but give it a whirl.
Start with your overall impression and go to specific bullet
Okay, if we could bring everyone's attention to the front, please. Thank you. I have to tell you, this was probably the most entertaining time for us to sit and watch the expressions on your faces as we watch this video, because I saw things from jaws dropped to people that almost looked like they were praying for the video. I don't know. Or run teacher, cooperate teacher. So, maybe let's this time start from the top and work our way down. So did anybody give this person a 4? What about a 3? On content, let's talk about content first. Any 3s in content? What about a 2 in content? Okay. A few meek little hands going up. How about a 1? A few more, okay? And a 0? Okay, so tell me why, before we look at the score, tell me what caused you to think that they should get a 0 in content based on the rubric. Somebody share something out.
Well, I just saw that students were not engaged at all with the content, and I saw real opportunities to process it. I just saw those 2 things off the bat.
Okay, thank you. He said he didn't see engagement and he didn't see any interaction with the teacher and the content. Thank you. Anything else?
We had the same 2, and so we had 2 twice on the other 2, and since it was tied, we went low.
that's a great point. She said she had the same 2 areas low, and then had a couple of areas that were marked as a 1, but because it was a tie, she chose the lower score. Thank you. Any other observations or thoughts about that? The winner is?
Okay, let's look at it. Okay, they came up with a score of 1. Let's take a look at the bullets. Accurate content shared. She talked about comparing and contrasting tragedy versus comedy. That was pretty limited, and I thought it was confusing, actually. So, but I'm guessing they scored that at a level 1. Share specific strategies for responding to questions. I mean, she was clear about that. Raise your hand, raise your hand, raise your hand. So she established a strategy, but she didn't really get anywhere with it. So that, again, was at a 1 level or maybe a 0. There was no opportunity, like the gentleman mentioned, for students to process information or to share thoughts with one another. She tried to shut down that table conversation time and time again. And there was only one strategy to share content. It was all about lecture. It was all about listen to me. There wasn't any opportunity for other ways for information to be disseminated. And very few children were engaged in the content. There was a lot of distraction going on. We could even hear some of the sub-conversations that were happening within that classroom. So again, your overall perception was this was not a very effective lesson. And the scores underscore that. Okay? So I agree, it was a 0 or a 1. Even though some people might argue that there were some 2 behaviors, I don't. Okay. Anytime you cringe when you're watching, that's a clue. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's go to standard 5. Julie, do you have a quicker thing? Oh, yeah, you want to, yes, talk about level standard 5. Okay, so here you go.
For such a well-oiled machine.
I'm getting there.
What about behavior, classroom management, level of standard 5? Negative number. How many people would give her a 0 in that? Okay. How about a 1? A few more, couple. Anybody higher than a 1? I think it was fairly apparent that this would be something that would take a lot of coaching for her. So as Diane shows you the next score, think about what would you coach this person on in terms of helping them improve? What would be some feedback that you would give them? And we'll talk about that when we get finished.
Okay, we were right on with this one, right? You guys voted 0, the team voted 0. There were various indicators that this particular student teacher, this is obviously a weak area for her. She, like Julie said, is going to need some coaching. It's going to need lots of demonstrations. It's going to need a lot of modeling. It's going to need a lot of suggestions. So the strategies used to monitor behavior were ineffective. That was at the 0 level. Behavior interfered with instruction. There wasn't a lot of learning happening. And again, that's at the 0 level when the whole time is used in a counterproductive way. Teacher candidate shows frustration. Was that obvious to you that she had it? She didn't know what else to do. She was beside herself. And you know, one of the things that we all, I'm sure, tell our student teachers is you have to fake it. You have to pretend like you have this. You are under control. You are calm. You are the adult within this situation. So this is time when you kick in your best acting skills and you show on the outside that you've got control of this, that you are calm and frustrated, because you could see how that intensified the problems. The more frustrated she became, the more the classroom kind of reacted negatively to that as well. So, lots of agreement on that one. There we go. That's a good place to move on. Yay.
So what kind of feedback might you give this person? We're going to talk just briefly about feedback. Yes.
Move around the room, don't just stand in the front.
Okay, she said move around the room, don't just stay in one place in the classroom. What else?
Actually have them discuss that we discussed that, but just think about it. Have them actually discuss.
Okay, get them more engaged, invite some conversation, get them involved in the discussion. Yes, ma'am.
Take them on a group, and that was their
Okay, great point. She said get them out of the group seating and get them all facing her. Sometimes when, especially older students, when they have their backs to the teacher, that kind of invites some disenfranchised behaviors. Yes?
Since they like to talk so much, I would put the learning back in their hands and do some cooperative learning.
Great, well, thank you. Okay, she said since they enjoy talking so much, to put owning the discussion back on them, own the teaching, and let them discuss on topic. Okay. Any other thoughts or ideas? Yes, ma'am.
It sort of seems to me like she cuts off all sort of desire that the students might want to have to talk in the first place on topic, because she said, we're not going to discuss that. So here's this question you can think about, but we're not going to discuss it. So, and you just need to listen to me. She even said that at one point. So I would encourage her to think carefully about what she says.
Okay, thank you. If you couldn't hear that, she said, she almost kind of stifled the discussion because she said, think about it, but don't talk about it. So maybe some modeling of how to have a on-task conversation, and then monitoring that, or maybe modeling, rehearsing it with some students to get them engaged, but don't stifle their interest in the topic.
And I think a lot of times you'll see that with student teachers. They don't have the confidence to give up some of that authority within the classroom. They're afraid, it's all going to break loose, and there's going to, I'll never get them back together. I'll never get it. But you do. You have to practice that in order for it to be effective for you. So giving up some of that control, which you didn't have anyway, and working at bringing them back after they have those opportunities to discuss.
The important thing is, as the quote up here on the screen implies, is that that lesson you could probably spend the rest of the day coaching about. But is that really the most effective way to provide feedback? Or is it more important to just hone in on one particular thing and just focus on, as Hattie and Timberly say, give them dollops of feedback? Again, you guys have a unique situation because you're going to see them every day. So you can dish out those little dollops of feedback until you see improvement in that area, and then you can move on to something, some feedback in a different area. So, but the key thing is, and I really hope that we've arrived at a place in teacher growth where we understand how vitally important that timely and meaningful feedback is. I think we're past the days of, good job, thanks for letting me watch your class and zoom out the door you go. I think we're ready, everyone's ready to hear how they can, what they're doing well, and how they can grow even more or build their skills even deeper through some specific feedback.
Positive and negative feedback, both are very, very valuable. When we reinforce the behavior that we see as effective, we're going to see that behavior more and more and more. And on the other hand, calling attention to behaviors that were not that effective and providing examples and suggestions for making improvements is also helpful. So don't forget both types. around, and this is going to be an optional form, so we're still going to talk about the rubric right now. So when this form comes around, just hang on to that for just a minute. With this rubric, this is going to be how you're evaluating that student and that student teacher when you're doing the evaluations. You're going to be doing a formative evaluation, and you're going to be doing a summative evaluation of that student. With this rubric, there have been different ways that people have used the rubric. For example, there was a little bit of discussion. Me being able to sit to the side, one of the things that I noticed is everybody was pretty consistent and together on the second one they observed when everything didn't go so well for the student teacher. But when it was on the other side where they showed some skills and not others, there was more variance of what the score was. So part of that is, as cooperating teachers, you're going to be seeing that student on a daily basis. And so this rubric can be used as a tool when you see something that they've done, you can go back and even put a date by that. And like maybe a notation of what you saw on that. And then when you come back another week and you see, oh, but they didn't do it then, you might put another date and another notation so that you can use that form that you have, that rubric, to kind of document over time. Because I think that was one of the things that people were struggling with when they watched that. Well, that was part of it, but we didn't see how this was introduced, or we didn't see this aspect of it. But you will see that on an ongoing basis. So when we looked at this and we're at the training, we looked at this as our primary thing that we're using, and that noting that that level 3 is highlighted for us. And why is that highlighted? What is the level 3 skilled area the target for? I'm sorry, what? By the end of the semester, that teacher candidate is at that level, okay? How many of you had cooperating teachers before this year? Student teachers before this year. Most of you had student teachers before this year. Okay, so if you used the MEES form before, one of the things that was often said was that they should start at a baseline at the bottom, and then by the end, they would move up. One of the things we were told in the training is you score them where they show. So that you use this tool to see where they show over time, and that you're going to input that as a formative assessment at midterm, and then the summative assessment at the final. Okay? And it's those summative scores that need to, if they perform at that level, need to be at what score or above? 24 for this field testing year. So with this field testing year, for cooperating teachers that aren't able to be at the training, they will get a video of this session so that they can see that. And you'll also get the video so that you can watch it again if you have any questions. So the idea is to score them where you see them, that they fit, and that we're hoping by the end of student teaching they're at that skilled level, that level 3. If you look at the pink form, you will notice on there that some of those specific scoring reminders are there. And I know that someone already brought up about if there's a tie, which score do they get? The lower score. So we know that. Anything else on there that we haven't discussed that you have questions about in terms of those scoring guidelines? And I know another thing that was different on the MEES from previous that Diane really hit upon is that each of those indicators are things that need to be seen. So that we're looking for those. It's not just examples of those. Okay, so this is the document that is what's used to score the teacher candidate. And this next slide is what it looks like in TaskStream. How many of you have used TaskStream? Okay. most of you. If you have not used TaskStream, you'll get the opportunity to use it, and you'll have coaching through that process because there's a team, Travis and others, who help support the TaskStream process. So when you go in to input it into the TaskStream system, you will be clicking on the appropriate section for each standard, okay? So if you look at your pink form down to the required MEES documents, it's this rubric that you have a hard copy of, and that's also available on the DESE website, that will be what you're using for scoring. And it will be also in TaskStream. As a minimum requirement, you do that at midterm, and that's a formative, and you do that in TaskStream again at the summative. Okay, so at the end of the semester, or for those who are in internships at the end of their experience. Okay, so you have a little bit different timeline if they're there with you the whole year. There are programs, however, that require more of these formative within TaskStream. Okay, so what we're sharing with you is what the requirement is as a minimum. But if you have a program, and I'll give you an example, English is one of them, they have more formative assessments within TaskStream that cooperating teachers complete. Okay, so the program will guide in that respect. The other thing that I want to point out for this documentation is that we're only talking about MEES documentation. So most of you have been cooperating teachers in the past, and when you get into TaskStream, there are a lot of different pieces that have to be completed by cooperating teachers and or teacher candidates and university supervisors. So there are things with dispositions, there are things with the specialty addendums, there are things with diversity. So we are only talking about the MEES. Those other things will remain the same, whatever that is for your particular program that you do. Okay? Questions about that? One of the things that you have in your packet is another one that says Missouri State on it. We talked about that earlier, was a cooperating teacher weekly progress form. That is something that is required by many programs, but not all programs at Missouri State. So it is up to your program as to whether that you as a cooperating teacher are using this. If you are not required to use it, but you find it helpful because it links into the 9 standards, then it's available to you, okay? But we're not listing that as a required document because it varies from program to program. Most, however, use this form. Okay, now you have the other tool that came around that we intentionally didn't put in the packet at the beginning, because that's an optional form by DESE, and it is on DESE's website. And during our university supervisor training, there was some discussion about how you might use this tool or not use this tool, okay? But you know that it's optional, and you can even write on your form at the top of it that that's an optional form. This one only includes the information relative to the standard, to the skilled level. Okay? So the rubric has 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so you can see across those. This one really focuses on the skilled level of what you want to see. It also lists, it also gives you possible artifacts of evidence for what you might use to be able to see if they're doing those particular things. On this other side, and this came up at the university supervisor meeting after the meeting, so I want to be sure that I mention that today. It lists 6
formative dates, okay? What you're required to do are what to complete in task stream are the one formative and the one summative. But there are assessments you do that are formative. Beyond that, but you are not required to enter in 6 formative assessments. Diane or Julie, do you have anything to add to that? Because that seemed to be a little bit confusing at the university supervisor meeting.
I think we should also mention that artifacts are optional this year. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, that's the next component here. So when you look at the optional documentation on there, and this tool is one of those optional things, the artifacts there is not an artifact at this point for Missouri State that is required across the whole EPP. Okay? So we are not requiring any artifacts from a whole EPP wide, so across all programs. However, your specific program may have specific artifacts they want collected. Okay? And I'll give an example. For an example with modern and classical languages, they are going to require an artifact, a specific artifact, one for each of the 9 standards. Okay? So that could be program determined, but that isn't across the university determined. And DESE at this point is not requiring that we collect something, but we want to know what's being collected across, what are you finding helpful and useful to be able to do the rubric and